So, JD, welcome to the 864 podcast. This is, super exciting that you're here. You've pastored both me and Randall, and you're a guy that I look up to a lot, I've had so many good conversations with you over the years and so much encouragement that you've spoken into my life that it was kind of a no-brainer for both of us to have you be one of the first people on our podcast. So thanks for coming. And we're excited. I hope you're excited too. Maybe we're all kind of nervous, I think, but
I feel honored to be here. It's a pleasure to be with both of you.
Awesome. So I guess to start, just maybe tell us a little bit about what you do, because maybe not everybody knows who you are or what you do. So maybe just a small blip about that, and then maybe just tell us why you do it and what got you started with that.
Okay. I serve as a senior pastor at Foothills Fellowship in Westminster, South Carolina. I'm bivocational, which means that I have other work that I do besides pastoring. So to give you a snapshot, a lot of my pastoring work happens early mornings. Okay. A lot of meetings from 6 to 8 in the morning and then evenings. My day job involves property management, which includes some animal husbandry, a little bit of fruit and vegetable farming, land management. I take care of a little over 500 acres for a family.
Wow.
So
that definitely keeps you busy.
I have plenty to do.
Yeah, cool. And so, I guess what made you, you're a pastor, so what made you kind of decide, or maybe talk a little bit about like when you first decided you wanted to become a pastor, and like what made you kind of take that step to become a pastor?
Well, let me reframe it.
Okay.
Deciding wasn't really the word.
Okay.
It was more like calling.
Okay.
For me, the calling to be a pastor happened about 10 years before I actually stepped into a pastoring position, but it was very, very clear that I was being called. I just didn't know when or what. And I would say, both Julia and I would say, by the way, Julia is my very dear and precious wife, but we would both say that the Lord made us willing against our own desires. We enjoyed people empowering and enabling small groups of people in our life to that point to do ministry, but we had never officially been in a pastoral role. The idea of putting our arms around an entire group of people and doing that was not maybe what we naturally gravitated towards.
So the process of becoming willing to do that, was that what that 10 years was, or did it?
It was. There were a few Jonah runs in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. So so the transitioning from kind of switching your focus to caring more for like a small group to a large group, how did you even begin to was that just kind of a thing that you let God lead with that and just pray for guidance along the way, or is there actually like practical steps that you took to kind of make yourself more comfortable with that?
Well, God isn't really practical.
True.
And he's not very efficient, but he keeps chasing and pursuing. So the life events and the things that we embraced in our life, both vocationally and missionally, I think the Lord used all of it. I don't think he wastes anything. But I realized that in his mercy, all of those events, even the different ways he intersected our paths in the areas of ministry we were involved in. And I'll give you a brief example. Like when we were with an organization called Northern Youth Programs in 89 and 90, we were young marrieds. We had 2 kids. We were engaged in meaningful in ministry. But the Lord intersected our path with a man by the name of Claire Schnoop. Claire was finishing his master's thesis at the time, and without us knowing that, we engaged him as a counselor. But he proved to be so valuable to our marriage, to even the parenting of our kids. Mm-hmm. He had a wealth of life experience, and it was just for a season. Like I rarely see Claire anymore, but season of life, he poured into us and provided for us things that were very formative in who we are today.
And so, like, backing up a little bit before that, you're from Ohio.
I am.
And you ended up in South Carolina through what kind of process? Because Northern Youth Programs
happened later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up in South Carolina because in the year of 1981, there was a fledgling new ministry that had originated in South Carolina by the name of Fair Play Camp School. They were on tour, just letting their needs and their ministry become known in various communities. They happened to come to my community. I knew they were coming to my church. I was a young man. I was not planning to attend because I had just come back from vacation on the day that they were going to give the program. My uncle called me on a Monday afternoon and said, "You need to attend that." He said, "I think you will be intrigued, and I think it may be a fit for you." And so I went.
Wow.
And I met the man that we know today as Granddad Yoder. He's been long deceased. Mm-hmm. But I met him that evening, and several months later, by invitation, I ended up in South Carolina checking it out. And by fall of 1981, I was here.
Wow. Wow, and the rest is kind of history, I guess.
It is.
That's amazing.
And I would just like to say, my uncle's nudge, he would say that he's a very insignificant, but I think that's how God works. Mm-hmm. That little nudge from my Uncle Adrian in 1981 changed the trajectory of my life.
Oh, wow, that's cool. I like that God using someone who thinks they may be insignificant, even looking back, if they think like, oh, I didn't even really do that much. Like, it's cool how God uses people like that, because even this idea of when you start to become like, or when you start to feel like you are significant, then you like get puffed up and you think you're all that. But God using people that think they're insignificant, that's cool. I guess you talked just a little bit about it with your mentor, but like talk to us maybe about like how you've, over being a pastor, how you balance, because you said you're bivocational, so you talked a little bit about how your mornings are a lot of your pastoring and stuff like that. How does pastoring affect like how you interact with your family, your friends, like your social life outside of your job and your pastoring? Like, what are maybe some things you learned over the past couple of years that have helped you balance that? Is it something you feel like you have a good grip on, or maybe sometimes like you don't really know what you're doing yet, or I don't know. So as lots of questions. Yeah. Okay.
All of the above. I would say that I have definitely learned a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll ever be done learning. I would say that a big part of managing, I almost don't like that word, because it conjures up this image for me where the idea is that somehow I have to pull my resources, my energies, and organize it, and that somehow makes me think that it's dutiful. When I'm managing, I'm somehow dutiful. Oh. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned is that I can trust God.
Yeah.
To trust Him to provide the thoughts and the needed conversations for the day. because I realize being bivocational and being a pastor that I cannot and will probably never be able to reach around to everybody and everything that may truly desire or want or need intervention or conversation. But I can trust the Holy Spirit,
That's good.
even as I'm working during the day, to bring needed people to mind, organizations to mind. Sometimes that means crawling off the tractor, stopping the tractor, and quickly texting somebody that the Holy Spirit has prompted me to. Sometimes it means making a phone call. Sometimes it means just pausing and praying. But I think am learning that can be trusted. The hard part for me is that when life is busy, I can quickly take that small, quiet prompting and lay it aside because I'm an efficient person.
Yeah.
And interruptions can feel invasive.
Yeah.
They're really not. They're the work of God. They're opportunities. So God is changing me in the form of seeing what used to look like obstacles or interruptions into honestly embracing them more as opportunities.
That's cool. Yeah.
And I'll give you a brief example.
Yeah.
So this past week, I have a paralyzed Hindu friend that we usually converse or have some form of communication about once a week. And I got a text from him Tuesday morning. And he was saying he's not sleeping well, that the accident that caused his tragic condition is really bothering him, and that he's depressed and he's sad. So my initial response was, okay, I need to respond to that, and I did. I told him that I would pray immediately and get engaged with it. But then as I kept working during the day, I was like, no, he needs human contact because he's so alone. So I reached out to him and just asked him if he could use some fruit and vegetables from the farm, and could I come to see him. So Tuesday evening I went over and we sat outside in the little apartment complex where he lives by the pool, he in his wheelchair and I on a little chair, and we visited for an hour. I'm not saying that because I'm something. I'm just saying that's how the Holy Spirit works. Like I knew in my heart that he needed more than a 2-minute text from me. He was truly struggling at a heart level. And we ended up sitting there and embracing. I was able to pursue him about his belief about rebirth. He would call it reincarnation. And I was able to talk with him deeply about what it means to be born again as a Christian. I don't know what kind of fruit that will yield, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
That's the work of God.
Yeah, and it's interesting just how, like, if you're going to be able to do something like that, you have to have some kind of time in your schedule that you can make something like that happen. I think often we fill our schedule completely full in the idea that we're going to be efficient with our time, but then we end up missing all of those actual moments that mean something. So with that, you're property managing. How did you get into that? Or because it seems to go pretty well with pastoring.
It does, and I will have to give props to my employer. He is a very kind and engaged employer who honors the fact that I pastor and am bivocational. And he wants to provide for flexibility. Obviously, the kind of work I do allows me to work my hours when needed. You know, if I don't have a meeting in the morning, I can go to work early. I can get on a tractor and take care of trail work and that kind of thing at hours that aren't required to satisfy the public. So I have that kind of flexibility, and I'm very, very grateful for it. very grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you were saying about how the, just tying in the whole trusting the Spirit to lead instead of the managing. And I think it comes from the, our desire to like have everything built out, kind of like you were saying, like we want to be efficient, and it's like that, you can call it an American mindset or whatever you want to call it, but the idea that we want to get our ducks in a row, especially like week to week, like you want to figure out what you want. And then when something does come up, like what you're saying, it feels more of a bother, or it feels more of like an inconvenience than it does an opportunity. Yeah. And I like how you spoke to that, and that it's the Spirit leading us to like, for him to use us. So God can use us in great ways if we follow that nudge instead of viewing it as a bother or inconvenience. But, and yeah, we never know what that could lead to, because that could have been a nudge from your uncle, and it could have been something that he just brushed off and like, I don't need to reach out to JD.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's cool that those nudges can go a long way, and that just trusting that, I like that a lot. Trust over managing.
Back then, he probably had to go to all the trouble to call you or something.
He did.
Because he couldn't just shoot you a text.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did. And then he accompanied me on my exploratory trip to South Carolina.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, if not for that, who knows? Like that's really, it's crazy. The trajectory of your life probably changed completely.
It did.
Wow. So I guess we talked a little bit about like your job. What were some things like raising a family while pastoring? What were some things that you maybe learned through that? Like, where was there times that you felt that, like, what did you do to basically make time for your family, and what did you do to make sure you were still investing in their lives and all that while you were pastoring? Because I know just you hear like the whole thing with a PK and like all that, like a pastor's kid and like them. So like, what were some things that you tried to do as a dad to try to make so that your kids still had the what they needed from you?
Trust me, I got that all right. That's just a joke. Honestly, I did. My actual pastoring started when my kids were a little older.
Okay.
But I will tell you that my years at the boys' camp, I put a lot of pressure on my family and my kids to perform and somehow posture in a way that would help make me successful. I had to walk away from that because at one point I became aware that my identity was formed around my position. And we spent a number of years as a family finding our way. I really felt like I had lost the hearts of my two oldest kids. And I had a lot of repenting to do, a lot of listening to them, a lot of re-engaging with them and walking back through. I'm grateful that the Lord gave me that opportunity, and I'm humbled by the fact that I would say that I have a wonderful relationship with my 3 daughters and my son. But that is the work of God. So as a pastor, 2 of my children were actually married and had left the home when I started officially pastoring. There were 2 daughters still at home. And they would talk about it, and if you would talk with them, they would talk about some of the stressors related to that. But I think we were also at a place in life where they were at a place where they enjoyed some of the same things that I did, things like hiking. They like to hike. I like to hike. If we got time to go engage that, there was just opportunity for meaningful conversation. And we're in a family where my wife is a toucher. She loves to massage people. And so sitting in the living room and getting a back rub and me giving one to my daughters as we talk, that was not uncommon. And while there were lots of hard things to get through, I wouldn't put that on the pastoring part. I would see that more as just a human flaw or my own sinfulness and self-centeredness that God was working on to correct. Yeah. And I'm just so grateful to the Lord this morning that I can sit with all 4 of my kids. Occasionally we need to go back and revisit something in our history. You know, it's not that it hasn't been taken care of, but it's the kind of thing that I want to keep current and provide opportunity for them to visit if they need to.
Yeah. I like you said it's not necessarily a pastoring thing, but like a human thing, because that just made me think you're, it would be really easy for you to just take the stance of like, it's because I'm a pastor that I'm not able to do this, and this. But you could say that about pretty much any job. Like you could have someone that runs a business that could very well blame everything on the fact that I don't have time to do all this. But then it all circles around then to like that, what are you trusting God for in that time? And like trusting him to provide ways for you to be able to do that and actually following that when he does lead. That's good. Instead of just blaming it on whatever occupation you have or whatever you're actually invested in. That's good. I guess, do you have anything else you want to get into with that before we move on?
I don't think so.
I don't think I do.
Yeah. Cool. Then I guess we'll just kind of move along. The next question we have is, what do you find the most rewarding about being a pastor? And if there's like, it's kind of open-ended, like you can either maybe give an experience that you've had in the last while, or maybe just like in general, what do you find rewarding about it? But just speak to that a little bit.
I can talk to that with joy and pleasure.
Yeah.
There are 2 things that are really, really great about the role. One is that I love to study. I've always loved learning. So the process of actual preparation, like for a sermon, the kind of work that it takes, that's a delight. It takes a discipline, but reading the Word of God and then doing the historical research about context and audience, that's a delight. So that's one. The second thing that brings just so much joy for both Julia and I is watching people bloom. When you invest time, energy, truth into a person's life, and then you see it bear fruit. You just watch the maturation process. It's like sitting on the sidelines and watching God do his thing. That is so much fun. And I think there are a lot of Christians that really, they miss out because they withhold from engaging at that level with people. You don't have to be a pastor to do that. Everybody can do that. Just care for people, love people, and then watch God do his thing. And that is so much fun. For Julia and I, we both mentor young people. Oftentimes those conversations start with people that are 15, 16, 17 years old, and then go on into their marriage, and sometimes that means premarital counseling, and that is always such a blessing because for us, what we believe about marriage, both its purpose and God's design for it is so fundamentally important to what we believe about culture and the fabric of how community is built. So that just brings us so much joy. I know that there are times, and there are even movements that emphasize like a moment when God does his work. And I know that God can do work in an instant. But I think there is something really, really rewarding about seeing God work over a span of time. the kind of little nuances that happen, the details that happen, the way God intersects a path, how he brings people together, the bends in the road. And I love the beauty of that. So I feel like I have a ringside seat as a pastor.
That's cool.
And my wife certainly enhances that part of my life because she's a people person. She loves people. And together, that brings us a lot of joy.
Yeah, that's so good. Everything you said there, picking apart. Yeah, that's...
It does take, I think for me, the part, that's definitely the upside of working with people.
Yeah.
I know too, like, a lot of times working with people takes patience because that fruit can take a long time to bear.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you even deal with that when you have somebody who you're working with but you feel like isn't getting anywhere? Is there any specific way you handle that, or do you just kind of like trust God with that process? Like, what advice would you give to somebody who is working with somebody and has been for a long time and isn't really seeing anything developing?
It's a good question, Randall. I would just say that the willingness to trust God today is different than it was 20 years ago, or maybe even 5 or 10 years ago. Like believing that he can and will work things out. I could tell you stories of times when earlier on I would find myself in a panic mode and need to control it, or the need to say something. I can tell you stories of times when I know I spoke out of my own energy because I was nervous for that person. Never bears good fruit. But I also know moments when I really didn't want to talk to a person, but God laid it on me. And I went in obedience, and then good fruit happens. I think learning in my own heart to sense when it is my own fear or when it is my own energy that wants to move ahead or hold back.
Yeah.
Because you really do, I think most Christians, if they're honest, know when it's their own anxieties and insecurities that propel both their movement or lack of movement. And when it is faith that actually provides for waiting or moving into.
That's good. Yeah, I think there and again, it highlights the point of just that kind of putting your own will to the side as much and just seeking out what God is wanting for you. And yeah, like to what you were saying, Randall, like even the long game per se with someone is such a hard thing sometimes. Like you walk beside someone and you just over and over and over again, you pour into them, and there might be nothing that comes out for a long time. And it, all along the way though, I think, like it's the choice of whether or not you're going to be faithful with what God put in front of you. And then who knows, some of them might never pan out. But I think one thing that I've even learned over the years, and I don't have nearly as much experience or whatever as you do, but just what I've learned is that the act of just deciding to do what God has called you to do, whether it's with an individual or whether it's with a group of people, like helping them, it's like when you walk alongside God with that, the joy of doing that and like being close to God in that is far greater than anything that will come at the end even.
Yes.
Like that gratification is great at the end, but it's the idea of like walking alongside God, like being in the passenger seat, like you said. And it's like that experience, if you can really draw near to that, that's what's going to help you kind of push through and just keep on going with that, because God wants you to be near to him, and it's a special place to be.
I think a life posture maybe that desires to partner with him. Like he's doing the work. But I can posture in a way where I'm willing to partner with him.
Yeah.
too often, I think, because of pressures from a position, we can want God to partner with us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's good.
And we also live in a results-driven environment, and people don't always give you the results that you're looking for.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, outcomes belong to God.
Mm-hmm. So in working with people, what are some things like with that? Have you felt that results-driven mindset creep in? Is it something like, how do you deal with that part, or have you just been, because you've been working with people more or less your whole life?
Yeah.
Is that something you've learned? I just know for me, working a regular job where, like, especially construction, you can see what you've done at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you even evaluate where you're at and like what you're accomplishing at your church? Is there any way you keep yourself accountable there? Do you have people around you for that?
I do have people around me, good friends, my team. There is accountability, and I treasure it. But in terms of like measuring worth or satisfaction, I would say that has been a long season of finding an okayness with not having tangible results oftentimes. In fact, I know it's kind of a word that's used loosely and often today, but I think there was deconstruction that had to happen in my heart and mind related to that over the last 5-6 years especially.
Even just removing identity from being able to prove something.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of really good stuff. That's yeah. I mean, do you have anything else you want to?
I don't think so.
I hate cutting off sections like this to keep things moving because it's so good, but we'll just keep on moving along. This next one I kind of had the idea. It's I'll just say the question and I'll explain a little bit about what we were kind of thinking behind it. What advice would you give to someone who may feel like pastoring a church is in their future plans? I guess with that, like
asking for a friend, or
no, just kind of like the sparking of like when you kind of feel that nudge. It can either be like a practical step, like what are some good things to try to learn, like techniques or even like study techniques or habits to get into, or even like what's a good way to kind of, I don't know. I don't even know what I was saying. Like, what advice would you just give someone who's kind of in that spot?
It can be a pretty broad question, I guess, broad answer.
But I guess I'm just thinking of more like that, maybe like high school student or like even someone that's out of high school that kind of feels like that desire. Not saying that they're going to be a pastor right out of high school, but like if they start feeling that like I really enjoy speaking and I really enjoy like sharing with people, that might be down the road. Like what are some things that maybe would be good for them to learn, or I don't know.
I have some big general ideas, but then I have one or two very specific things to say to that.
Yeah.
But in a big scope, you learn to trust the story of God. And with that, the willingness to embrace seasons of hard things. Sometimes people expect that if it's the anointing or the call of God, then the blessing means that everything will go well. And that is not how God develops most good leaders. Good leaders develop through hardship and through stretching. And those sometimes come in the form of relational tensions. Sometimes they can happen through life situations that just make us lean into the story. That's why I say learn to trust the story. That can be, your marriage may go through a hard time. Learn to lean into trusting the story. Even when the feeling may be absent, learning to believe that God is up to something good and you can keep walking and trusting Jesus. I would say that one of the pitfalls that this culture has related to the dream of being a pastor is that our culture wants excellence. And because we want excellence, we often, maybe unknowingly, put our pastors in a place where they get put on a pedestal. And I see the pedestal as being one of the most dangerous things that happens to a pastor. Because once you're on a pedestal, often you're lonely and you feel a pressure. It can be subtle, but you feel a pressure to perform, to stay there. And there's a part of your humanness that is sacrificed in the process. So a very practical side, if someone feels the calling or has the longing to pastor, is develop a kind of human connectedness. First of all, with your wife, if you're married, the kind that is truly transparent, but then also find a way to gather a few good friends around you who will tell you the truth about yourself and your situation. That means that they will love you enough to tell you the truth about who you are. Because I find that to be so, so helpful in the current culture that we live in, where people want excellence. We want somebody to look to and give us the answers. To have that group of people around me who are willing to give me that is invaluable.
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
Do you ever feel pressure from so I can, get on my phone and find the best sermons ever preached out anywhere, podcasts, you can follow whatever kind of person you want, very charismatic. Do you ever feel pressure from that side of things, like people expecting you to be Timothy Keller or whoever it may be in the, out there that knows how to preach really well, has this deep knowledge? What's that like today, knowing that, everybody has access to that? How do you deal with it?
I do listen to people like that. I think they have a right to bring their influence to me. But if I trust a story, I can learn from people like that, but I still have to be comfortable in my own skin.
That's good.
And bring who I am.
Not just try to be whoever you're listening to.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's good, though, that you still, it's not like you shut off people that are trying to maybe give you good advice, or even because that can be the flip side of that, too, is that if you're so comfortable, where you think you're so comfortable in your own skin, but that just turns into stubbornness, where you're so thick-skinned that, anyone that says anything about you, they're you don't want to listen to anything. So,
well, that's
or
really
give advice. Yeah,
that really is a form of idolatry. When a person gets to the place where they can't learn from others, and you believe that you're right all the time, that's you're becoming your own little god.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
The other piece of advice, very practical advice, that I would have for someone who is thinking about it, is the idea of Sabbath. That has changed for Julia and I a lot over the last 3-4 years. But I think to deal with this, with the cultural trappings of the pedestal, deliberately putting days or times aside for healthy margin. First of all, for our marriage, but also time for reading, for writing, for engaging with God in prayer, I think I would lose my sanity if I didn't build that kind of stuff in. There are days on our calendar where nobody knows except Julia and I that are just built in for that. The days are blocked off. If somebody calls and says, I need to meet, and I say, well, I can't, I'm full that day, it may be that day. And unless it's a dire emergency, it will just happen. Because as a pastor, Sundays are rarely actually restful. And when you're bivocational, you can work all the time. And so the idea of Sabbath, I think the idea that we actually have a God who showed us how to do that, how to just rest. And he invites us to be a people who learn how to rest. It says no to this idea of clamor and always needing to be more, do more. I think that's a clamor that our culture really puts on us as a pressure. And as a believer and a follower of Jesus, we're invited to say enough is enough.
Yeah, that's good. That I like the idea of having like your Sabbath between you and Julia. I like that. It's like a good way for you to draw near to each other as well during that time, because that's so important while you're doing anything, I guess, is to be close to your wife. And that instead of just kind of drawing, I mean, I'm sure some of your Sabbath is that isolation and reading and writing and all that, but including that time where you and Julia can also just be near and like spend time together, that's good.
Can't wait for that day in July.
Now, do you practice that on a practical level? Is that something you work in each week, one whole day? What does that look like when you say like you're practicing the Sabbath?
I take time every week, but we do the day together. We set aside a day a month.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Now, there are other times that we will do it, and during the week, we're going to find a way to get Sabbath in some form every week. But a designated day where we're just away or by ourselves.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really good. Do you have anything else you'd like to bestow upon our future generations?
If you can learn to rest, that's
good.
That's just.
And usually you would think it'd be the opposite. Like if you're trying to learn how to do something,
learn how to work harder.
Yeah, work harder, spend more time, more energy into something, and then you'll get better at it is kind of the idea. But the just taking care of yourself and resting, that's good advice.
Well, I think the current culture begs us to be preoccupied and distracted. And preoccupation and distractedness leads to indifference. You can be really busy, but you can be really indifferent. And if you're going to love people, which is what a pastor's supposed to do, called to do, you can't be indifferent, because indifference is the opposite of love.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. One more thing on that real quick. So I do attend your church, for those who don't know, I guess. But one thing that I've appreciated about the way you've pastored in the last few years is even just being honest about and maybe prepared ahead of time about passing that leadership role on and talking that to the church. I feel like that's something our culture hasn't always done just a great job of, is we sort of allow our pastors to go until they can't anymore. And then all of a sudden we get in a crisis mode.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really appreciate about the way you lead with intentionality in investing in the younger guys, whether that's those who are 20 20 to 40 years old or whatever that is, and making people aware of the fact that leadership doesn't last forever, like we hope it does sometimes. I would love to have you pastor our church for forever. I do really appreciate what you do. But maybe just what would you say to a pastor who's maybe leaving or knows their time as a pastor is about up? How do you release a church that you've put, all of this time and effort in, and have it set up for success?
I don't know that answer, Randall.
Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah,
I guess.
I just have to walk trusting Jesus to provide as we walk it.
Yeah. I think that's I've heard so much of that this morning, that it's just that ongoing theme of just like trust, and like trusting in his plan, trusting in his story, trusting him with your time, all that. It's so much of like we want to be right there beside God, and we want to fully trust what he has for us. And when things are out of our control and we don't know the answer to things, we have to lean in on that and trust him for the outcome. That's good. Last question. We have about 10 minutes yet. We can take all of them, or you can just super short and end it. But massive question, but you can, what's one thing the world needs more of, and why? You don't have to, just one thing. And I mean, we know the world needs a lot of things right now, but what's one thing that you can think of?
Jesus.
It's good.
I would like to put a little language to that.
Yeah.
I think culturally for us as Western believers, we often settle for the good life instead of the abundant life. And I want to talk to that just a little bit. If we need one thing in this culture, it is people who are sold out to Jesus and actually embrace who he is and what he calls us to. So the difference between the good life and the abundant life, and I'm drawing this from a sermon that Marty Solomon preached a number of years ago. He preached a series on the 7 great I ams from the book of John. But in his one sermon, he specifically references this idea of the difference between the good life and the abundant life. The good life being, what do we tell our kids in school? Work hard, make good grades so that you can what?
Succeed.
So that you can go to college and get a good degree. Why? So you can get a good job and have a good career with good benefits so that you can have a good retirement. And the whole idea is built around this idea of security. But what fuels the good life is self-preservation.
Wow.
The need for me. The need for me to take care of myself. And it's fueled by an underlying insecurity and fear and anxiety that I've got to control these things or it won't be right.
Wow.
I think the other life, the abundant life that Jesus wants to give, is based on self-sacrifice.
Yeah, that's good.
And the result is love, justice, mercy, faithfulness, generosity, kindness. But it is powered by a willingness to trust. And ultimately, that gives you freedom.
Yeah, wow. That's so good. That's so good. I like that. The abundant life versus a good life. And one of them is very self-serving, self-pleasing, said self-preserving. And then the other one is basically the complete opposite, making sure you're caring and loving the people around you. And it's a story as old as time, is that when you love those around you, your life will be better. It's just it's how it works, and that I think it's a massive lie in America that the more you have and the more you get, and the quicker you can retire, the happier you'll be. And I think that the idea of giving out instead of taking everything in is good. Do you have anything to add to that? That was
I don't think so. It would definitely change the way our culture interacts, like people with each other.
Yeah, if everybody would think of other people before themselves, it would be drastically different in America or anywhere, I guess, the world. And some people do that better than we do, for sure. But I think if we cared more for each other and more for the person across the room than for ourselves, it'd be really cool.
I just think about what would happen in Oconee County if 500 Christians in this county would embrace this call fully.
Yeah. Wow.
Like,
yeah.
you could turn the county upside down.
No, that's so true. And oh man, it's exciting because it's like it's a very practical thing. It doesn't, some people can think, it's just hopeless. But even you bringing it back to even Oconee County and like, what can we do as individuals? Like, what can we do as a church? What can we do as a friend group to love one another better? And we can make Oconee County an amazing place to be just because we're loving each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool because, I mean, the grand scheme of things, the world matters, but it matters a lot what you're doing and what you're doing in your community and how you're letting God speak through you. So, and that ties in perfectly to what we want to do here on the podcast, is bring more light to that. So that's awesome. I think, do you have anything else you want to ask him, or while we have you? But
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I'm good.
Sweet.
Thanks a lot for coming on and
Yeah.
being the first recording anyway, maybe not first to release, but we'll see how that goes, I guess. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on and being prepared. And it was really an easy interview from this side of things.
Yeah, no, and it was basically exactly what me and Randall were hoping for, at least for me, is that we want to have these conversations for both, like, to encourage other people, but also me and Randall just want to interact with whoever we're interviewing and learn from you. And it was so encouraging. And so I've heard so many good things to take away from this. And even just thinking through stuff together, it was good, and it was wholesome, and it's leaving here excited. So, and that's,
thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be with both of you.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that wraps up our time here, and thanks again.
Yep.
Sweet. Alex, that's a wrap. Cue the